This one's going to be fun. Got some really good speakers. Waiting for people to kind of get involved. So welcome to Insights to Building Community. I think this is a really good second session almost to the Destination Canada session that we saw earlier today about thinking of community and the host community and community first and building around that. So if you weren't at that session, that was a big theme of what Destination Canada is working on to think about the host community in the development of the tourism program. So both of our speakers are going to talk about community and also sub-communities within the community. So who are these subgroups that are coming as tourism groups coming into communities, and how we address the needs of the community as well as the needs of those sub-communities that are coming in. So our first speaker is Howard Teachin with Epsilon, and he's got 20 years of experience in this. So he's got some great stories. We've had a good time. He put on his thing that he's going to talk about the tourism revolution. And I think that's a theme again of this conference that we keep hearing about, changes and big changes coming in our industry. So he's going to take that, and I'm just going to give him the podium.
Afternoon, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Howard Teachin, and I have been doing this for a really long time. And when we talk about the tourism revolution, what we're really talking about is, thinking about how we change the mindset of DMOs to really start to think about community first. And how do we utilize all the tools that we have now at our disposal that we have not had for years and years, all the data that we have to really think about our jobs as destination marketers, or better said, destination managers, to improve our community, not just heads and beds and tax revenue and so forth, but the overall wellness of our communities. And we think that's hugely important as we continue to move forward as practitioners in our trade. Confession, I'm not a researcher. I'm a habitual marketer. And so I'm coming to you from this, from the standpoint as a marketer, not as a researcher. But I want to talk about data and how we use data to then do marketing campaigns, and then what the results of that will be. So just to kind of set the stage here, when I was asked to do this, they asked me to come up with some case studies of how we have used data to help a community. So the one that I came up with that I thought was particularly relevant as we are now in the hopefully the end stages of the pandemic, into the endemic stage of this, is how one particular community used data in the midst of the pandemic to continue to thrive. And that community was Naples, Florida. And we worked with our friends at Paradise Advertising, their agency of record. They came to us with a very specific concern. So it was the winter of 21. And the concern that the community had was the fact that they were really worried that their winter residents, as we refer to them in Florida, the snowbirds, were not going to come. People who lived in Cleveland and Chicago and Detroit and Minneapolis, who owned second homes in South Florida, were they going to travel in the midst of, and especially at that particular time, December, January, February, of that winter, Delta variant was raging. It was really terrible. Lots of people were getting very sick and dying. Would these people leave their homes in Cleveland or Detroit or wherever, travel and go someplace? The folks in Naples were concerned because if they don't show up, that's such a huge part of the economy of that city, that ultimately it was going to have such a detrimental effect on the tourism product itself. Because if they don't show up in the winter, restaurants, shops, etc., were going to go out of business. There would be no product when the summer travel season came back around. And so the challenge they gave us was, how can you use data to be able to identify those winter residents? Because nobody could figure out how to do that. How in the world do we find somebody who lives part-time in a destination? So if you don't know a lot about Epsilon, we are arguably the world's largest data management company. Our clients are, Walgreens, Walmart, Home Depot, General Motors, Toyota, people like that. Our little travel vertical that I work in works primarily with destinations, but also with major brands like Marriott and Norwegian Cruise Lines, et cetera. So, and what we do is we use the data that we have. So we have a database of about 220 million unique individuals in the United States that is totally anonymized. All the personally identifiable information about those individuals is stripped out of the records. We know about 7,000 things about those people, and it all comes from various different sources, public records. So we know the type of vehicle a person drives, because we can see their motor vehicle registration information, we can see voter registration information, et cetera. So we can start to identify where people live based upon the information that we can see in public records. But then the machine algorithms continually are processing, looking at shipping addresses and so forth to identify where a person lives. We also see credit card expenditures. So we can tell exactly what people are spending their money on. We see about 60 to 80% of all non-cash transactions at point of sale. We're credit card agnostic. And so we're actually seeing the transactions that occur at point of sale. So as we started to work with Naples, the idea is let's find people who live in, let's say, Cleveland, based upon their residential address, who in the previous year had spent money, their credit card transactions on site in December, January, and February of the previous year. If they'd spent money in 3 consecutive months in the destination, we said, bingo, we have a person who is there long-term, i.e. a snowbird. So being able to identify them and then serve ads to them with the message that said, Naples is open. I joked about it when I did my introduction the other day at the first session in Florida. We just decided we're just going to go for it. My Baptist friends in Georgia was just like, Jesus, take the wheel. It's okay. We're going to do it. And in retrospect, we fared no worse than anyone else. We did not shut down. Businesses were open. There were some mask mandates and that type of stuff. It wasn't totally the Wild West, but it was open. You could do business, you could travel, you could be out, and we had the benefit of outdoor recreation and so forth. And Naples had all of that, and then some. And so the message to these individuals was, you can come from Cleveland or Chicago or Minneapolis or wherever it is, come to your home in Naples, because now you can be outdoors, you can play golf, you can go to the beach, you can do all of these things where you're going to be safe, and you aren't cooped up in your home in the winter and not being able to go anywhere. And it was an amazing success. What I'm going to share with you is exactly,
Yep.
There it goes. So we, in the identification process, we identified 558,000 people in the targeted markets that they gave us. And it was Chicago, Boston, Minneapolis, Cleveland, Detroit, Northeast and Midwest cities, where they knew that a lot of these people who own second homes in Naples lived, and then identified them as having spent money in the destination over multiple periods of time. So 558,000 of them. Of them, we saw 12,000 of them actually show up in Naples and spend money in Naples then in the measurement period. And our attribution metric is the fact that the credit card showed up. So the same attribution that we were using to identify them then determined whether or not they had actually shown up in the destination. And so that was a 2% message traveler rate, conversion rate, whatever you might want to be able to call that. More importantly, they spent $60,000 on this campaign. We measured $7 million in spend. Now, we're not set up to do real economic impact type studies. What we're mostly doing for our DMO clients is looking at travel type expenditures. So that does not include things like, any type of doctor visits that they went to while they were there, stuff that they bought at Home Depot for home renovation or repairs and so forth. This was grocery spending, retail spending, dining, et cetera. So that provided a $117 return on investment. That wasn't really what their goal was. The goal was to get people to come there. But what that provided to them was the fact that they could then go back to their county commissioners and said, we spent $60,000. This had a huge impact. It was a positive return on investment, and we got people to show up and income, and the positive impact on the community. So as we dug deeper into that, this is a pie chart that shows you the transactions by category. And what we were really hopeful and what did happen was, you see lodging was only like 2 or 3%. These people didn't come and stay in a hotel. They came and stayed in their home that they owned there. But more than 50% of the money that we measured that they were spending on their credit cards was in retail transactions and groceries. And if you look at that, 2% of the transactions, 29% of the transactions were the retail category. That was $2.4 million was spent there. And 20 some odd percent of the transactions were in grocery spending, another $1.5 million. That's exactly what the community was hoping that would happen. And that's why it was so important to them, because if that doesn't happen, if they're not there spending those dollars, then the negative impact. But if you also look then, around the pie chart, all the other 50% of the transactions that were occurring in the destination. What they also wanted to do though was to make sure that they had the right people showing up. So we started to look at this is just visitors by category, again, just demonstrating the fact that they were spending the money in the transactional categories that we were hoping they were spending the money in there, because they are actually residents of the community. As we started to look at the revenue by feeder markets, we're using terms that we normally use for travel because it's just the way we're set up, but it wasn't really, it's their home markets. We were able to identify, and I'm going to walk over here and just talk real loud. I can't do that because I'm on Zoom.
Yeah.
Sorry, Zoom folks. The line graph is just the percentage of the impressions that we served in that market. So this is exactly what we were looking for, where that line graph matches the bar graphs of the number of visitors and the percentage of spend. So it was a very efficient and effective campaign, spending that money wisely and showing it. And then as we looked at the demographics, that told an even greater story. And this is what was really helpful for, as we started talking about community building and really helping this community. If you look at the average age, the age 45 plus made up 87% of the spend that occurred in the destination. Again, thinking about who we were targeting, how we used the data to target them, and how we got them to come to the destination was hugely impactful in the fact that we got people who would be the type of people that would own second homes. If you look at net worth, it's even greater, where you see people with $500,000 or more, 70 some odd percent of all of the spend that occurred. So these are people that had accumulated wealth and household incomes of greater than $100,000, 70% of the spend came from there. So, net and all of this thing was the fact that they had a very specific need that was needed by the community at a very specific time using data. And so that's where you guys come in. As we start to think about you and your roles as researchers working at DMOs that you work in, what information do you have? And we'll talk about more about this when we get into the Q&A, is what are the challenges that your destinations are facing? What are the specific unique things that you need to be able to help as in community development? One other piece of this then was then looking at post-pandemic or endemic stage that we're in right now. Now that everything's opened back up, there's 2 new flights coming into the Fort Myers Naples airport, one from direct flights from Los Angeles and from San Francisco. And so we did the same type of campaign with there, where we identified people who live in those 2 destinations who are frequent flyers, again, by credit card expenditure. We were able to see these people spend money on flights frequently, and they travel to Florida frequently. Let's reach out to them. This campaign just ended, but and so we're still measuring the results as we continue through our 90-day look back window. But already the $55,000 that they spent, we're seeing a $58 to 1 return on investment, and nearly 2% of the people that we targeted have shown up. And again, the demographics show that same people that we were targeting in the other campaign are now showing up from these 2 destinations as visitors. A little bit older. It's Naples, Florida. It's an older community, high net worth, high household income. Very important to that community to be able to bring those types of people to the destination now as visitors, not as residents.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Howard. I don't know if you Zoom people can see me because it might be over my head. But if you have any questions on Zoom, put them in the chat box. And at the end of the meeting, we'll read through the chat comments as well. The rest of you guys will have to wait and raise your hands. Things. So, okay, our next speaker is Keelan Cruz. He is with, I'm going to get this wrong, AirDNA. I got it. Okay. They work with over 250 DMOs from around the world. And as well, he is an Airbnb superhost, which I find really exciting. I'm a big Airbnb user. And so I think the interesting perspective that we're going to hear is part of the community and also researching the community and the role of the Airbnb market on the case study that he's going to talk about in Cape May, I believe. So I will hand the podium back over. I'll leave the microphone up for the tall people.
Thank you very much. Good to see everyone. Who's excited for happy hour? Yay. Sorry for the Zoomies. So very interesting topic. You know, if you've met me before, this is I sound like a broken record. I've been talking about the Airbnb Vrbo community for 5 years now. I see Dudley smiling. Many others, Nate, Marlies. So this is a very topical thing, especially now. And I think Howard's presentation really gets to that. So within a community, there are these sub-communities. And as tourism researchers and as tourism professionals, how do we better understand, accept, not accept, analyze a community? So what I wanted to do today was focus a little bit on that with a case study from Cape May, New Jersey. So I'll give a quick overview, talk about kind of how I'm personally defining community as a part of the Superhost community myself, and also as a part of the DMO community, a research nerd, and try to kind of align thoughts on that, and then go through the case study. And then of course, we'll save time for y'all to ask questions of Howard and me. So AirDNA, quickly, again, this is a broken record to some of you. So we offer data and analytics for destinations, hedge funds, real estate firms, hotels, etc. About 50,000 all-time customers. We focus on any market that has basically more than 5 short-term rentals across 120,000 markets. And so that allows us the scope, size, scope, and scale to really offer destinations like you a true kind of third-party understanding of Airbnbs and Vrbos in your markets, and also across the world in other competitive markets. What do you do with that data? Many of you know you can really kind of understand the tax decisions, understand where taxes are being earned, understanding many of the metrics you get from your STAR report. So ADRs, RevPARs, occupancies, number of properties, etc., and really becoming a voice of authority to be able to speak to this in an intelligent way, like you speak to all of your paid accommodations. We'd like to empower you to do that. Our data sources, our main source is scraping. So we've been scraping Airbnb and Vrbo for almost 8 years now. We're going to be adding booking.com next month. We've got about 1 million PMS integrations from channel partners and other software companies. And then inside our MarketMinder app, which many of you are probably familiar with, we have about 35,000 properties that offer their iCals to us. And that helps us to discern some of the kind of confusion and difficulties of scrape data. So let's talk about community metrics. What defines a community? So I did the typical presenter thing, so I Googled it. Webster says a group of people with a common characteristic or interest living together within a larger society. So raise your hand if you're a part of any sort of community. Okay. So what I was kind of thinking this in the context of is, religion. So where do we go to church? Neighborhoods, where do we live? Friend groups we socialize with, people I golf with, where our children go to school, who we work with, who we research with. These are kind of the communities and themes that I'm thinking about in defining a community. I also like Google's definition a little better. It just says a community is a group of people who share something in common. And so I think the common thread there is literally the word common. And so what are some of the attributes of community? So maybe a shared vision, identity, core values, integrity, common goals. And again, I could bore you to death and do 10 more, but I think these for me really help define how I think about community. So let's kind of take a step forward. So in terms of, and again, this is, I'm a one-trick pony. This is with regard to short-term rentals and paid accommodations. How do these themes or these attributes, how do these kind of translate to metrics for DMOs, destinations, researchers? As many of you know, short-term rentals have become a lightning rod, especially, and I'm looking at Wendy, who's been talking with me about this for probably close to 6 years. And she was one of the most innovative people that really thought about this early on and said, this is going to become a part of our tourism picture. Many people jumped on board. Many people have been studying this for a long time, and many of you are in the room. But during COVID, it became a lightning rod issue because now, during the pandemic, and as Howard mentioned, now it's more of an endemic, travel has changed. People want to feel safe. They want to travel in groups. Maybe you're a family and you have small children and don't want them in the same hotel room with you. Travel is changing. And I think the pandemic really fast forwarded that for some, especially smaller destinations, non-urban destinations. And so as we think about that community in the context of data for accommodations, what might that mean to us? So integrity might be, where are these properties located? These are some of the, I've had 1,000 conversations with destinations over the last few years, and where are they? Who are they? Where are they located? How much revenue are they generating? Are they collecting taxes? From a shared vision standpoint, are they collecting taxes? Are they licensed properly? Are these taxes coming to my destination? Are they helping feed our overall tourism budgets? Common goals. So what is the future pace? Is it growing? Is the pandemic over and therefore short-term rentals, are no longer going to grow? There's going to be a decline and people move back to hotels. Growth trajectory in general. And then identity. I think this is incredibly important. When we think about hosts and guests who are a part of this community, we have to think about them as tourists as well, and as contributors to our tourism economy. And so how do we identify them? Where do they come? Where do the tourists or guests come from? Where are the hosts? Who are the hosts? How can we ensure that they're part of this community? And the answer, in my humble opinion, is data. So data is the currency of travel, and therefore data is the currency of community. If we can't identify, if we can't have a shared vision, have a communication mechanism together and understand the metrics behind community, how will we be able to prosper as tourists, as hosts, as researchers, and as destinations? So we'll do a quick case study. So Cape May, anybody ever been to Cape May in New Jersey? 1. 2, anyone online? So it's a fantastic destination. It's America's original seaside resort, and there are a lot of hotel properties. The destination has historically been defined by hotel stays, and the pandemic brought a major shift. So the hotels were shut down, travel was banned, yet every local restaurateur, every local homeowner said, there's all these people here. Where are they coming from? And so the local destination, the Cape May County Tourism Bureau, decided to take a step in understanding who these people are. And so what they were able to do is get a better understanding of the design of the post-COVID or current COVID traveler. So this is a quote from Diane Wieland, who is the executive director of Cape May. She said, "We have so much to offer, but the hotels were closed. So how was this happening? How are people coming in?" She asked herself. They know that there are second home folks returning to their vacation homes, but they really were curious how this community was changing and how it would look in the future if COVID ever ends. And so what they found out was fascinating. So they were able to really dive in with data that we provided on kind of three aspects. So looking at prior trends to understand the level of revenue, the average daily rates, the occupancies of these properties, how many, where they're located, and also the future of travel. So we were able to help them look at pacing and understand for the future, the next 6 months, how is travel pacing? Should the local restaurants stay open? And the key decision for Diane and her team was truly that travel had changed and there was a flattening of the seasonality curve. So she was able to use data with this community to convince her local restaurateurs and local tourism companies that winter was going to be much more popular during COVID. And so the results that they found by really studying this and understanding, a changing part of travel was shocking. So they knew that hotel spend was and visitors coming into market would spend about $2 billion a year. They had no idea that 47% of the residences in Cape May were short-term rentals or vacation rentals or second homes. They had no idea the average daily rate of these properties was almost $550 during the pandemic, which is much, much different than a typical hotel stay. And that's critical, right? Because now they have a baseline to understand how this looks, how this changes in the future, and they can much more, in a much more clear way, understand that guests that stay in these properties are willing to pay more, right? They're willing to pay for the safety, the amenities that come with it, whether it's a pool or a hot tub, extra bedrooms for groups and families traveling together. And they realized that there was 80,000, well, first of all, 62,000 demand nights in 2020, which was just shocking when you compare that to their hotel metrics, and 80,000 demand nights in 2021, and $43 million of revenue earned from short-term rental hosts in 2021, which was just a pretty exasperating number. And so with these decisions and with these data points that Diane and her team were able to look at, they were able to close the circle even further. So another decision that they made beyond, kind of convincing restaurant owners and tourism operators to stay in business for the winter season, they also took it full circle. So they do an annual visitor guest survey. And as part of this community, realizing, there's 900 properties, $43 million of revenue, this is something that we need to keep our eye on. So Diane and her team actually reached out to the hosts in that community and asked them to help them deploy their survey for 2021. And that's going to be an ongoing effort for them. And so, conclusion, Diane's team, used data to understand this community more, to find more to find more answers via data to help inform their decisions and insights. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll start with the group here. Any questions for our speakers, either one of our speakers? Okay, let me just check. Okay, any of you on Zoom, now is your chance to type in your questions into the chat. Okay, Okay, well, I have a question or two. I have a question particularly on the Airbnb side of things. What about, you said it's a flashpoint. What about, are there issues and how are you dealing with showing this data to convince communities whether or not this is a proper fit for them?
Yeah, it's a great question. It comes up all the time. How do we create sensible policy to inform future governance? So do we ban it? Do we ban short-term rentals? Do we put moratoriums in place? The answer is definitely a mixed bag. I think it depends on the location. I think it depends on whether it's a highly residential area or a vacation rental destination. I use the example of Santa Monica, where I live full-time, and Palm Springs, where I vacation. Palm Springs has 15,000 vacation homes. Santa Monica is a residential area. So Santa Monica chose to ban any whole home properties that were on Airbnb or Vrbo if they didn't have the host on site. Whereas Palm Springs, a little bit different, right? They've got the Coachella Music Festival. They've got a giant tourism group that comes in for these concerts. Golfers come in, bachelor parties, and I think every destination is different. And I think the theme of it is to help inform decisions by really looking at the metrics. And this is something we've done a bit of research on recently, and you'll see this come through at Destinations International and on a blog post that we'll be releasing soon, to really talk about how you can think about policy. What metrics should you use? And I mentioned some of those in the presentation. Some of them are as simple as how many properties. Maybe there's a number looking at historical data that helps inform that. Maybe it's maybe it's something more granular like demand. What does demand look like in 2021 versus 2019 pre-pandemic? Are we trying to achieve something different post-pandemic? Really, I think the most important thing to take into account is local residents, right? There's certainly a policy mechanism that has to listen to the voice of that community itself, because again, vacation rentals are a sub-community of almost every destination. So informing that policy using data is a really, really important facet. And I'll give you one example. So the city of Big Bear in California, it's definitely a mountain destination in the winter, summer lake destination in the summer. COVID hits, every Angelina like me is jumping ship out of the city, can't go to restaurants, can't go to bars, you're going to Big Bear. And so they saw just a huge surge in visitors and traffic. And if you would have gone to their local, council meetings, you would think that these guests are awful, right? You would think that there's murderous rage happening in the streets. And I truly listened to some of these council meetings. What they did is they used our data to look at the granular property level detail and tally up every reservation night that was booked in the last 2 years. And this is during 2021. And they found that 0.03%, so 99.7% of all reservations do not result in a police activity, a filed report, or a complaint. 0.03% do. And that was a critical piece to bring to the table at their policy discussions with local citizens, because then you have some facts and data to support maybe a counterpoint. And in a lot of cases, it's to support a point. But I use that example because I think it's a pretty stark figure. So I think that the key takeaway is it's different for everybody. I think you have to use data to help inform those decisions.
Okay, any questions yet? Come on, guys, it's not that late in the afternoon. Chris?
Well, this is just a clarification, Tom.
Yeah, I'll repeat it because we can't hear you. Yeah.
The $546 daily rate in Cape May, that was for homes as well as, that was not rooms, that was homes, correct? So, I just don't want any hoteliers, I guess they're not in the group, but that was for a 4, 5, 6 bedroom home.
It's for 2 bedrooms and above. That's
Got
the
it.
average daily rate, including cleaning fee
Got it.
for homes with 2 or more bedrooms.
So-
For 2020.
Okay, thank you. Well, I have the mic, just a little.
Our third speaker today.
It sort of bothers us that STR reference.
Mm,
So I'm going to propose STVR, short-term vacation rental. Just my suggestion. Thanks.
Okay, I think we made a new acronym today. So that's awesome. Okay. I was going to ask Howard real quick to talk a little bit about some of the questions that as a DMO, you could ask your local community that could be solved with some big data that you might have accessible. So the question, and then we'll last call for questions.
So I think it's a challenge that we face today. And I think as our industry continues to evolve and mature, the job that you do as researchers plays more and more critical role in the success of our organizations, moving from destination marketing organizations to destination management organizations. And that's why I chose the case study that I chose today, because we were talking about a very specific challenge that a community has. So I'm going to answer that question by really just challenging you to be thinking about, what problems or opportunities can be taken advantage of or resolved by using data. So just, a few examples. We work with Savannah, Georgia, for example. No problem at all getting people there during the weekends. Midweek travel has always been a bit of a challenge for them. So being able to use data to be able to identify people who actually spend money in destinations midweek, not on weekends. Or you might have a very specific niche type of audience that you want to target. So might that be a new beer trail that you have, or a wine trail that you have, specific events. So thinking about who the potential visitor is for those opportunities and or challenges that your community faces. And I think that as the researchers in your organizations, you have a very unique opportunity right now to really drive that forward. I know Dudley and I are working with University of South Carolina right now. We're in kind of the idea stage right now of being able to address those types of things with the possibility of tying things to a survey, et cetera, to be able to really understand who that community is, potential people who traveled to the destination, learn more about them, and so forth. So I think the time is right, and you guys as the researchers in your organizations can be the driving force behind that.
Okay, if there's we have a question.
You can just repeat this one.
Okay.
So Howard was talking about the snowbirds in Naples, part of the presentation, and my understanding was he was talking about seasonal residents. Was that right?
Correct.
So why did they make the decision, or was the decision explicitly made that when they did this marketing, they were going after seasonal residents and maybe not also transient visitors from those areas?
You want to go ahead and you repeat that.
So the question was, why did Naples decide to go after that seasonal resident?
Let me clarify and say, I was thinking that some of those homes might also be short-term vacation.
Correct. So why did they go after the seasonal residents versus transient?
Yeah.
So you would have to understand Naples. I mean, the community there has embraced these seasonal residents and really have built infrastructure around that and so forth. And this was really driven, it was more political than anything else, Dudley. It was local politicians going, oh my God, sky's falling. If our seasonal residents don't come back this year, the negative impact on the community is going to be huge. So in that particular case, it was addressing a very specific issue that had come up in board meetings and county commission meetings, et cetera. It's like, oh my God, we got to do something about this. And they turned to the CVB because, they are the marketers in the destination. They couldn't go to their economic development folks. They don't do marketing. So it was, they turned to the CVB and said, can you help us? St. Paul, Minnesota did something very similar in the midst of the pandemic. All the restaurants were just, shuttering up. The mayor's office came to the CVB again. You're the marketers, help us. And we did a hyper local campaign there where we targeted people who lived in St. Paul, Minnesota, with a campaign that specifically said, keep our restaurants open. You don't want to lose, we cannot afford to lose this. Our quality of life, what you love about the community that you live in is in danger. And the mayor got involved. It was really kind of a cool campaign. The mayor once a week actually delivered an Uber Eats delivery to a selected resident in the community. Yes.
I'm a little confused. I thought that the purpose of the study was to identify who all these people are.
Identifying the question was, she thought the purpose of the campaign was to identify the people. So A, it was to identify them. B, market to them, letting them know that the community, that it was safe to come to Naples, it was safe to be here, and you can get out of the winter doldrums in Cleveland or Chicago or wherever it is where you're on your primary residence, come to your second home. It's open. Our community is open. They actually have it's called the Paradise Coast in Florida. And so they did what they called the Paradise Pledge, where local shopkeepers, restaurateurs, hoteliers took a pledge that these are the standards that we will meet. And so they promoted that just to get those folks to realize that they did not have to just shutter up in their home and endure a long, cold winter. They could come to Florida where they can do the things that they love because it was open. You can play golf here. You can go to the beach here. You can do the things that you love.
So when you're reaching out, is that one-on-one able to identify who owned those?
Exactly.
houses and
Can identify who owned the houses. So that was the unique thing that they could not figure out how to do that. How do we find those individuals? So what we did was we looked at people who lived in, I'll use Cleveland as an example. We know these people live in Cleveland. We know, so identifying them, we then looked at the credit card expenditures from the previous year. And if we saw transactions occurring in Collier County, Florida, over a 3-month period, that there were transactions in December, there were transactions in January, and there were transactions in February. That person was there for 3 months spending money. So we then made the assumption that if they were there that long, spending money for that long, they didn't make 3 separate trips there. They were there for 3 months. Therefore, it's very likely, not positive, but very likely that they're a winter resident, seasonal resident in Naples. And so that became the pool of people that we targeted, the 500 and some odd thousand that I showed you.
were you able to then get directly to that person?
Yeah, exactly. So our ad serving platform then allows us to, once we identify these unique individuals, and again, it's all anonymized, it's 83% of the adult population in the United States is in this database. And so any of you that live in the States, most of you are in this database. All your personally identifiable information is, so I couldn't say it's Dudley, but I know Dudley becomes ABC 123, but we know he lives in Columbia, South Carolina. We know that he drives a specific type of vehicle. He's a registered independent.
I'm gonna say Tesla or.
Yes. And so there's about 7,000 things that we know about each one of those individuals. So at the point of bid on an ad serve, we can see that, you know, this cell phone, this computer, or whatever is linked to this individual, and then serve them an ad.
Okay, I'm gonna wrap it up. Thanks everyone for thinking about the community. Again, I think, you know, building on the community first and understanding the residents of the community and the impact that both these subgroups have on not just the tourism products and services that we think of traditionally in our industry, but outside of of those normal, how these impact grocery stores and all the non-traditional businesses, non-traditional tourism businesses, and how we think about those now when we think about our community building and the impact that these subgroups can have on the entire community. So I want to thank them for their time and effort today. I also want to thank their clients for allowing them to share their data and that today. And thank everyone for coming to beautiful British Columbia. And for those of you who didn't come, thanks for tuning in on Zoom. And we'll hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. And thank you very much.
Hi, Zoom people.
Thank you.